Joining me on this journey is Jim Sheehan, founder of the Community Building in Spokane and the Center for Justice, former public defender in both Seattle and Spokane, a man of vision demonstrating his heartfelt beliefs in sustainability and fostering community. Jim, delighted to have you on this journey.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to ask you, how did your journey start as far as, first of all, being a public defender? That tells me you already had a sort of a conscientious desire to sort of be of service to others.
I think so. After I got out of law school, I went immediately to being a public defender, and that's all I ever did as a lawyer until I came here we started the Center for Justice. So, yes, I think a lot of it had to do with just feeling that as a lawyer, as a person, in our world, I needed to be of service, and that's really an important part. And the law part of it is just the vehicle. It's not It wasn't like I am not a lawyer. I am who I am, and lawyer is just my vehicle to express who I am.
I think it's really wonderful when people find something that they have a passion for and they can actually make a living at it as well as be of service.
And really lucky in this culture to be able to do that.
Right.
A lot of people, as we know, don't. And
I believe that's the major frustration. And perhaps, as I've chosen to do, I've chosen to try to balance that out by having my creativity and my service to the community through other aspects.
Sure.
But I think we each have to find that avenue. It's important to reach that balance.
Absolutely. And it is really important to just be who you are and realize that what we do is not who we are. What we do is an expression of who we are. And so it's really important and essential that we learn who we are. And the fact is, we are who we are. It's just a matter of becoming aware of it.
Now, you have taken a step further, and I will say that since, we're not visible, we're both from that baby boom generation,
right.
In the stage of our life, I believe, where there is a sense of responsibility to give back to our children's generation and now to grandchildren's generation as well. Your vision to have this community building in Spokane, can you elaborate on how that came about?
Well, community building, our community building is, we have to first look at community building is, and the building part of that is both a verb and a noun. So it's a place, but it's also an activity at the same time. And it came about because I just had an opportunity to be able to do something. I received an inheritance from an aunt who was immensely wealthy and left me a significant amount of money, and so I was able to do this, or am able to do, building this place. And this place community is about, is the way that we can do something in changing our culture. Because right now our culture doesn't bring people together. I think it separates us, and it separates us in a lot of different ways, with fear and that sort of thing. And so what we need to do is bring people together, and place is really important in doing that. And that's what we've done here at the community building, and we have 25 various nonprofits that all work in this building and work for justice in one way or another. And we have a fair trade store, and we're renovating a new building, and we'll have a whole bunch more groups in there. Some politicos too, which is really interesting and fun, because then we can talk with them about things that we feel that by we I mean everybody in the building can talk to the politicians about what we think they need. So it's a really good opportunity.
I've been in your community building, and just the feel of it when you walk in the door is different than other buildings. Mm-hmm. And of course, there is that sense walking around and observing the nonprofit organizations that are here, hearing their communications, seeing, what they're doing. There is a passion definitely going on here.
Sure.
You have fostered that sense of community and working together. They seem to be talking to each other, which, as you said, having even some political people here is remarkable. But tell me about the actual renovating of this old building. I believe it's over 100 years old.
Yeah.
And when was the renovation? What time frame?
Well, we had started with the first building we did was it opened in 2001. We actually started it in 2000. And what we did was take a look at the building as a space within an environment. And even though it's in the middle of the city, in the middle of downtown, it is in an environment. And so we want to be sure that the building fits into that environment. And in renovating the building, we wanted to be sure that it was a beautiful space, a peaceful space, a space where people wanted to come to work. They actually really wanted to be in a place that is that fosters a sense of peace and justice. Because and in doing that, there's a whole bunch of different things that you have to take into consideration. The design of the interior, the way that, like in this law office that we're sitting in now, you can't come out of any office, doesn't matter who the person is, the lawyer or the paralegal or whoever it happens to be. You have to come out and walk into a common area. And that's the way it is in the entire building. You have to come out into a common area. So you connect. You have to connect. I mean, you may connect by just walking away sometimes, obviously. But, that's at least the opportunity is there.
Opportunities.
And then, of course, the materials that you put into the space are really important because we've used all non-toxic, environmentally sound materials in the renovation of this building and what we're doing in the new building.
And I know, too, that you've used and recycled some of the older wood that was even original from here and yet is still durable. And I think people probably don't realize that there is so many uses and recyclable materials in older buildings. Oh,
it's incredible. I mean, in fact, there's an industry right now, a major industry in the big cities, and I'm sure in Seattle, and certainly I know there is in San Francisco, where old buildings, when they're taken down, the lumber is salvaged and then remilled a lot of times. Because that old lumber, a lot of the lumber that we have saved from this building and the other building is old growth.
Right. Yeah.
These buildings were built 100 years ago, and so it was, what we use now, if we use new lumber, it's all certified, and so.
And I want you to elaborate on that. That's a company that plants as many trees as it's. I mean, it's going through the reforestation.
Yes, it's partially that, and I'm not exactly sure, but there's a certification that is given to lumber that is that certifies that it's environmentally sound, and it has to do with what you're talking about.
So there's not just clear cutting and
right.
walk away and take
Never.
the profit and
Absolutely.
Go on to the next. And
right.
That's paramount I think for what we need to be looking for our future.
Absolutely. It's you put a small footprint on the earth doing that, which is something that is essential that we learn to do, each one of us in our daily life and also in our professional lives.
Now, your rooftop building of the first building has solar panels, and I understand the largest array in Washington State will be on the third building that's being renovated currently. Why did you choose that? What effectiveness is
to me, Brenda, it's an absolute no-brainer. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like you have energy that is clean, it's renewable, there is absolutely no footprint at all on the earth at all. Now, I do appreciate that the building of the solar panels creates some, there's some environmental issues with that, but it's a set off, and what we're doing with the photovoltaic cells up there is just creating the opportunity for people to use energy with no environmental downside at all. I mean, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And when we finish this new array and we open our building, I will challenge the people of downtown Spokane, like Nordstrom's and Bank of America and all of the people who have buildings down here. There is no reason, in my mind, that I can see that they shouldn't have solar panels on their roof. They have the money to put them in. It's economically feasible because if you have the capital outlay, then you can put them in and then you're going to recoup that. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense. And we have in Spokane a convention or an opera house that is slanted, and it could house a huge array. And there is no reason in my mind that we shouldn't have panels on that building or virtually any building.
Now, one might assume that the energy company, which is a local company here, Vista, might not appreciate, having people generate their own energy. However, I understand there's credits given and there's actually some incentives to go with alternative energy now, which I believe is just an overall good thing for the whole community atmosphere. And then in some cases, as you mentioned, a huge array might actually give back energy to help the city run.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just it makes just total sense to me. And the Vista, the energy company here in Spokane, will, if they have any social or environmental consciousness, will begin to realize that they really need to do something themselves and create arrays that would power the entire area.
Now, your community building here in Spokane is being looked at by another group out of San Francisco that I met with, Global Exchange. They would like to look at this as a model. Any city can look at this as a model. And certainly from the top down, from the rooftop with solar panels all the way to the use of good environmentally safe and healthy products as any renovations are undertaken. And you've even gone so far as to the lighting and air quality and how you use different filters so that it's not circulated throughout the whole building. I mean, there's a conscientiousness that you're exhibiting and demonstrating for a friendly building to be friendly to the environment as well as to the people that are here working or come to visit. And I assume that can only benefit in the long run the bottom line that companies are so interested in.
Well, to give you an idea, we were hoping that when we put the building together, we would save 40% of the average that would have cost to energy usage in that size of building. And it appears now that we're going to be able to save 70%, which is dramatic. I mean, absolutely.
That is huge.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
And one of the things we're doing is that we're drilling 2 wells in the back. We have a little area in the back. We're drilling 2 wells, and they go down. We finished one hole, and it goes 230 feet down, and it hit water. So we will heat the building using the thermal energy from the earth, the water, which will be at, let's say, I don't know exactly, but say 55 degrees. So if it's 20 degrees outside, we will be heating only from 55 degrees because it's the water that will be the source of the heat instead of outside where it's 20. So we're going to,
there's
you can
savings
see
right there.
Huge amount, and then
that and water is such a clean, really, warm, obviously feeling heat. I've been in radiant heating, whatever it's called.
And then it goes back into the earth, and in no way is it damaged or polluted in any way.
Now, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the Center for Justice and the commingling now that have here of the young people and the older people too working together side by side.
Right. The Center for Justice is a nonprofit law firm that I started in 1999, and what we do, the center, you have to understand that the way we look at it, the center is not just a center of like a building, a place to come. It is that, yes, but the center for justice is also denotes our center of us, our core. So that's where justice resides. And what we do here is a lot of civil rights. We do a lot of environmental work. We're working to try to clean up the river. Two biggest polluters of the river in this area are the city and the county, and then Vista and a couple of other major organizations are also. And so we're in we're working with, trying to work with both government and big business. And so they may not see the cleanliness of the river in the same way that we do, but we'll see. Anyway, also in the center, we also do a lot of work kind of triaging kind of issues of landlord-tenant and some family issues and getting people driver's license. It's just a very eclectic kind of place as far as the things that we do. That program where we deal with clients is called community advocacy. And we have 6 lawyers here and paralegals and staff, but we also have a lot of law students. Part of our mission is to have law students come here and work here and see what we're trying to do and develop a certain legal consciousness. And I don't mean know the law. I know how to use the law in a way that demonstrates a social consciousness. And we have 2 or 3 retired lawyers who come and volunteer here. We have people from the community who are there's a woman who's out here working today who has been with us almost since we opened, and she comes down 2 or 3 times a week and has volunteered here. She is amazing. And we have students from Gonzaga undergraduate and Whitworth College, Eastern Washington University, and we have high school kids here too. Program at Lewis and Clark High School that sends 2 or 3 kids down every year for a class, and they come here to work in a nonprofit, and so we always get kids from there. And Gonzaga Prep and some from Seattle or North Central. So it's been, we have a real cross-section of age and experience, people working here, and it really is good because everybody learns from everybody.
I think other companies can benefit from allowing some retired folks and some of the younger interns to just come in, even if it's, during a really busy time or the summertime. Or I don't think they think of that, that there's resources and that, working side by side like that shares all this wisdom and experience, great mentoring, and then sets a young person off on a track. Now, you mentioned you wanted them to have more of the legal, like the conscientiousness. So have you, in your past, I believe you related a story I'd like to hear for our audience about actually evoking an emotion while you were giving a closing argument that maybe takes the practice of being an attorney and a lawyer to just that next level?
Well, it's the story you're talking about, Brenda, was I can't remember what the trial was about. It was a criminal trial, and I needed to demonstrate that my client had some deep feelings, and that's all I can really remember about it. I don't even remember the client right now at this point because it was years and years ago. And I had a spiritual director at that time. She was a nun at Gonzaga, a marvelous mystical person who was a musician and a great writer of music. And she said, what you have to do, Jim, is be love. Don't talk about it. You have to. So that amount of time that you're talking to the jury, you have to be that. Well, you can't just turn that on and off.
No.
You've got to develop that. And because we all are love, it's just whether or not we're aware of it or not. And I had to try to bring that to awareness. And, again, it's the law then only becomes a vehicle for who I really am. And hopefully, that's what I really am. Hopefully, I mean, setting myself up by any stretch of as a person who is love, but that's certainly what I am. It's just whether I'm aware of it or not.
That's also tapping into what I think we're learning to call quantum physics, a resonance, and that if you set a resonance, it actually spreads and can have an effect on others' frequency, whatever they're vibrating at, whether it's anger, stress, fear at the time. Sort of assist that love, that compassionate resonance to occur. It's scientifically being proved, but it's really an ancient teaching from many of the masters.
Sure. Well, you think about it for just a second. This conversation that you and I are having, it doesn't matter whether it's on the radio or not, but just this conversation will eventually touch every person in the world, because you will go out and connect with people who will then go out and connect with people who will then go out and connect with people, and so will I. And so it may take 20 years, but eventually it will. So the energy that is created between us in our conversation and every single conversation and contact we have every single day is something that is felt throughout the entire world. So if it's fear-driven and fear, hate and greed and all those things, that all goes out. Same with love and justice.
And that's a universal law of attraction we're learning about. Because our conversation, whether or not the words are heard, the energy, just like you said, has gone out. It's already affecting, and it's attracting to it like energy.
Sure.
So it's building on whatever nice spiritual conversations about love and compassion and justice are being spoken to or felt, actually felt. The words are really meaningless at this point.
Yeah.
It's the vibration. And so we're building on it. I don't think people realize that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a great book by Brian Swim called The Universe is a Green Dragon. I think it's published in about 1984, and it talks exactly about what you just mentioned about the attraction. Brian's a cosmologist and a PhD in physics who talks about bodies and stars and stuff that attract to each other because of the love idea. So anyway, that's a recommendation.
Thank you. And recommending, let's see, what did you do in maybe your middle of your life that set you further on your path of becoming more of a spiritual person? Because I know each of us have our own either crisis situations, I believe, turning points, mentors, an event, or something that happens. And I think this generation, my children who are in their mid-30s, all three of them, pushing 40, one of them even, I see a much more difficult path than you and I had. There's just more stress, faster paced, more technology to deal with, more mechanical, less person-to-person, more email, more cell phone, less really connecting. And I'm alarmed at that because the disconnections, as we pointed out earlier, are there. The separateness is there. And so give us a little feedback as to that journey.
Well, for me, I was always a person who was interested in. I was kind of a seeker. I would search for different places. I mean, I did a lot. Like I read all of Tolstoy. I read that him too, but I read a lot, most of Dostoevsky while I was in law school, and that was way more important than the stuff I was reading in law. And and I continued that and read a lot of philosophers and moved into the mystics. And then a friend of mine, a really good friend, Paul Pierhans, who teaches at Seattle Prep, was going to a Zen session in 1983, and he said, why don't you come along? And I thought, well, that sounds fun. So I went along, and it was a lot different than I expected. And I began a path of sitting meditation and working in some Zen ideas and ways. There's no real ideas in Zen. I mean, Zen doesn't have a dogma. It's just it's more a method. And I was raised Catholic, and that tradition also influences me in a way where I read a lot of the great Christian mystics, John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, and my personal favorite, Meister Eckhart. And then just for me, I just sort of tried to, it's just been a process of 25 years of sitting and reading and talking and trying to be.
I think our ability to sit and be quiet is hampered a lot by our surroundings and our environment. It's difficult to find a quiet place anywhere.
Sure.
And even when I'm walking in the woods and I think I've gone up about 2,000 feet in elevation, I can still hear those 18-wheelers going down the highway.
Well, I think you're right, Brenda, but I think also that the real noise is in our own heads.
Mm-hmm. That mind chatter.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I had a teacher, Willie Jaeger, who was a Benedictine priest and a Zen Roshi, which is unusual to have that combination. And he would say, he was German, and he'd say, down and see who is the master of your house. Sit down to try to be quiet. A lot of ideas and junk that flies around in your head are pretty hard to get just quiet.
I believe also that you and I probably both had those moments, those excursions into that timelessness to where we would not hear any noise, a train going by, because we have finally managed to get to that deeper ourselves, to that center, that spot. But those moments are fleeting. We want to put more of those together, which brings up yet another thing about being present in the moment. Mm-hmm. I believe we both have that consciousness that if we can stay conscious and become aware and be, ask ourselves, am I being present right now? Am I focused on exactly what I'm doing, no matter what that is fully? And who's the power of now?
Well, I think Eckhart Tolle is who's written a couple of books, The Power of Now and The New Earth, and he talks, and he's not, he's just reiterating a lot of what all of the great mystics, be they Buddhist, Jewish, Christian, or Hindu, or Islamic, all basically say that present is the only thing that exists. Reality exists only in the present moment. There is only the present. Past is merely a memory, and it's an idea. It's not real. And the future is an anxiety or an apprehension, but it is no reality. It is just whereas the present moment is. And so for us to be truly present means we have to learn how to stay or be. We are all we're all in the present moment. That's all there is. It's just whether we're aware of it or not.
Aware of it.
And Tolle talks about how future is just our ideas, and the past is just our ideas. And so many of us live what he calls the pain body, which is all of the stuff that we remember as from the past that creates within us the issues that we have, and it's all ideas. It doesn't have any reality at all, and we have to become aware of how to be present at this moment, at this time,
I think there's a connection that when we feel that peacefulness and calmness in the silence is exactly where we need to be all the time, that connected. And we're the ones that break the connection, by fear, anxiety, stress, letting that get that, and then we wander around feeling separate, alone, and wonder why.
Yeah. Well, and then our wondering why is the very, it's just an extension of the pain body that, it just goes on and on and on, rather than if we begin to go into that place, we sit and say, this is just idea. It's really, and that doesn't mean that it's not simple, and we all have a heritage and all of that, and it's difficult, but the reality is that past doesn't exist.
I love the demonstration of metamorphosis by a caterpillar to a butterfly. And reading to my granddaughter recently, there's a really good book about the little caterpillar and the whole cocoon. And right after that, we saw butterflies everywhere.
Yeah.
Butterflies in the garden, butterflies on billboards, butterflies on a T-shirt. It was like butterflies, just as a reminder that, we each can go through that tremendous metamorphosis. And I wanted also to just kind of elaborate on this conscientiousness and the ability of us to focus on something. I read once, and it was by Tom Brown, who on the East Coast was growing up in a little bit before our age, a little older than us even, when the whole area of New Jersey where he lived was acres and acres of wonderful land and wetland and hiking in the woods. And he, at about age 7, had the good fortune, synchronicity, spirit intervened, and an elder Native American who was like in his 80s at the time took him on sort of and started training him. When we're thinking in urban environments and destruction and trees being cut down, in a bad way, the clear cutting without even any forethought, what this elder taught him was that you can ask to be connected to the developer, whoever's sort of in charge of that project, whoever is the one that can make the decision at a spiritual level, at a soul level. You can ask permission because your soul and others, as we know, we're all connected. And that indicates that we can be active spiritually, I think, and try to evoke change, but in a different way. I wanted to ask about this whole idea of spiritual activism because, of course, your group's here. A lot of people that are coming to the community building are still coming with the idea of waging peace against, the war, fighting for what's right, going to change the political people by, trying to get them ousted. Is that a right energy to evoke these changes?
The energy for them, they are in that place. I think that you don't really wage peace. It's a difference between real peace is not an active verb, but it's a state of being. So real peace is just being peace. That's where it resides. What comes out of that would be peaceful activity. Will be peace. Martin Luther King is a good example, I think. When you read Martin Luther King's work, you think that he is really a waging peace and is involved in a lot of marches and all that stuff. The real strength and power of Martin Luther King is his mysticism. He really is a mystic who really was grounded in Gandhi and Tolstoy, both of whom are also deeply mystic. And by that I mean they're trying to be rather than do. The do comes out of the being, and that's what King did. And so when you really read his sermons and his writings, that's what he is advocating is developing, or not developing, because you don't develop it, but just becoming aware of your own deeply peaceful self, all contained within totally, and it's just whether we're aware of it or not. So I don't think you really wage peace. I think you are peace, and maybe it's semantical, and I think a lot of people who would say they're waging peace would agree with what I'm saying. It's just a matter of how you active verb or a verb of state of being.
I get the comment too often. It's too fluffy. It's too airy-fairy. It can't work.
Sure. Yeah. Then you can ask the person who says that is, how is it working right now? Are we doing really
there you go.
well?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. How are things? Is the world in pretty good shape with all this active stuff and stuff that isn't airy-fairy? Well, I think that the world speaks for itself in ways that it's in pain. I think it's really important also for us to realize and to be aware that the earth is really alive and that all of us are part of that living, moving, organic, loving, caring organism, and that we truly are part of that, and it's all connected, as you said earlier, and we're all one and we're all in it together. So if we believe, or if we understand and really are aware that this is alive, this earth is alive, then maybe we'll treat it in a way that we want to treat those that we love.
I think we're caretakers. We certainly are never owners of any of the land or the buildings or whatever we think. What we're paying mortgages on is really not ours. But
ownership, and all of that is just all human constructs, a way of living together in a culture, any kind of culture, and private property. All that stuff is not. It's just a method. It isn't reality.
There is no real way to convince people, I believe, about this peaceful nature. I would agree with you totally. It truly just has to be demonstrated in order, I think, for people. And like you said, look at we can point out, look at the world and see what shape it's in and what changes might. But those changes still come from within and resonate out.
Sure, I think it absolutely has to start with each one of us. I mean, start. That's the only thing we can change, the only thing we have control over. And even then we don't have control.
And so many people say, well, for me to take the time every day and meditate or read is a luxury, and therein is the guilt of maybe a mother, my own daughter, 6-year-old, 3-year-old. She's a high school counselor. Her life is just jam-packed from 5:45 in the morning till about 9 o'clock at night when she just falls in bed. I can't imagine, how she can insert within that kind of hectic life a spiritual path.
Well, we're all on a spiritual path. It's just whether we recognize it or not. We're all on a path and moving in a way. And is it all working for her? It's a prioritization. It's what is important. And so often, I don't know your daughter, but I certainly know friends of mine who get themselves so incredibly involved in things of the world that don't exist, that aren't real, and that they've just become so incredibly important. All they are distractions from reality.
I'm trying to impress on all of, not only my children, but because they're actually the last ones to listen to me. Yeah. Their friends are more impressed, when we visit over dinner or something, with the fact that they have a mother that seems fairly intelligent about certain things and takes my advice. Because what I've come to realize is, just like you said, we're on a spiritual path, regardless of whether or not we fully recognize it. Because every thought goes out, every feeling goes out and affects then what comes back. Mm-hmm. What we most don't want if we're putting attention to it, is exactly what we get.
Sure.
Therefore, put our attention elsewhere on the better things in life. At the same time, it becomes to me now a 24/7 journey. When I start out in the morning, I use this example. I love showers. Mm-hmm. I bless the water, because if there's ever a day when I can't have my hot shower in the morning, it's not going to be a good day. No. So I'm grateful for the water, and I bless it. The work of Masaru Emoto, I believe, is indicated to a great many people now in a mainstream way that water is affected by our very thoughts, and by energy, and by
movement. He has some great pictures in his books that are really
amazing.
Yeah.
I helped a 14-year-old at a Catholic prep school do that freezing of water after we played Enya to a glass of water and then a hard rock band.
Yeah.
Those crystals, and we had to work at keeping them frozen. We had to be in a deep freeze with a special camera and a high-speed film, and we pulled it all together and took pictures, and they were so dramatically different. Yeah. Enya's music, which is, beautiful Celtic, quiet, peaceful music, had beautiful symmetry. The rock music was all jagged. And then we just wrote love and hate. Same thing. So imagine, look how much we are water. So our thoughts, the music we listen to, all the vibrations that our body takes in. I believe this sort of, once again, this quantum physics is proving a God, a creator exists, pointing the way. So even for a left-brainer, they can get it.
Sure. Well, and all of that is, it's rational. I mean, the things that the quantum physics takes a certain and proves something. What they're proving is something that's rational. The things that you're talking about, that I'm talking about, is beyond the rational. It's transrational. It goes. There's a certain level. Ken Wilber, who is a marvelous writer and thinker, has set up has levels of consciousness that he has tried to, delineate. And when you do that, then you sort of make a hierarchy, and you can't help it. But he's really not talking about a hierarchy at all. He's really talking about just levels of development where each of us are. And the rational is just one place along the continuum. There are areas of consciousness. I'm not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about consciousness that are so far beyond the rational, so far beyond an incredibly intelligent person. Look at you can see this. I mean, the great mystics, Ramana and Wilber himself, and Eckhart, and all of these guys. In Teresa of Avila and Juliana, and, just to name a few, are experiencing something that is transrational. Rational is thought, and how we arrive at something. But what I'm talking about is an experience, and you can't really explain it. It's ineffable. You can't really.
So when you have it, you had one, even briefly for a few
but
seconds.
But even then, it's whether or not you can accept it and what you do with it that's really important. Because, and a classic example of that is Teresa of Avila, who had a deeply mystical experience and said that she couldn't deal with it. And in her later writings, she wrote about that and said, wow, it was 10 years later or something, she had another, and then she was mature enough or able to bring it together. What that does is demonstrate, I think, Wilber's integral theories about how we have to be integrated as human beings in all of the areas. We have to develop all of our areas, even the physical, the contemplative, or the spiritual, and the cognitive, and the emotional, so that if you take, let's say, for example, you have a deeply, deeply intelligent, incredibly smart genius person who filters that genius through a 12-year-old kind of emotional life. And we see that all the time. We see that in just all the time. And it can be so terribly destructive because they have this depth of genius cognitively, but emotionally they're 12-year-olds and they're egocentric and they're crazy and and all that. The history is complete with people like Hitler and Stalin and on and on and on. That's what happens to those people. So we need to bring it all together and develop and become aware of every part of our makeup.
When we're looking at all our physical and spiritual, just as you said, I'm trying to think terms that you've used here of sustainability, and we mentioned those wonderful moments too. And now I'm thinking in terms of sustaining my spiritualness, my presence too.
Yeah.
But let's take it out to the home in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Sustainability.
Right.
You're fostering it here in your community building. There's a sustainability forum. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, out of that, what would you expect people to do when they go back home?
Well, I think sustainability is the same thing as justice and beauty and love. I think that sustainability is something that you can't really describe necessarily, but you can experience it. And by that I mean there's a whole bunch of things that we can do. The typical definition of sustainability means we put a small footprint on the earth and that whatever we use does not deplete that product or whatever that is you're using for future generations so they can use it too. And and that's all great. But it's deeper than that because it is a way, it's a path, it's an awareness. And I think for what people can do, to answer your question mm-hmm. specifically about what people can do, is it's really important that they are where they are. In other words, they're simple things. You can recycle. You can buy products that are not put a big footprint on the earth. You can use lighting that is environmentally sound and not use a huge wattage and all that.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen, there's a lot of light bulbs now that the energy companies are actually, I think, giving to people if they'll use them
sure.
to help cut down on that too.
And there's all those kinds of things. All of those you don't drive, you ride your bike or you walk when you can. You use public transportation if you can. You eat foods that are grown locally and preferably organically. And by doing that, then we don't use lettuce grown here that's grown in Chile because mm-hmm. Think of the transportation costs in both in energy, fossil fuels, and all. And it's just what does they say? I think I've heard a statistic say that the average meal travels 1,500 miles or something. And that's
it's ridiculous.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And there's plenty of farmers in this area. Mm-hmm. Now we have a short growing season, a 6-month growing season. It's different than if you live in the Salinas Valley in California, where they have a 12-month or almost a 12-month growing season. But there's ways to
extend that. And
Sure.
There's ways for a city like Seattle, who has less land now
mm-hmm.
because most of it's developed, to even grow. It was heartbreaking to me when I lived in Kent when I first moved to the Seattle area in '85 to see all that fertile ground poured concrete, and then all the Boeing plants went up.
Sure.
On where it used to be nurseries and greenhouses and a lot of farming previously. I don't know how we would recover if we find ourselves in a sustainability crisis where we really need to start planting our food again.
Well,
how are we going to do that?
Yeah, I think we're I don't think we'll find ourselves in a sustainability crisis. I think we are in a sustainability crisis.
We're moving rapidly that way.
I mean, you can just take a look at our global warming situation and the environmental degradation that goes on every single day, and know that we've got these major problems. And they have to be dealt with, or we're going to reach a tipping point where we're not able to recover. And, I mean, this is stuff that's in the news and in the, the talking heads are going about it all the time, and there's lies and all kinds of things that are going on. But it's each one of us has to make the effort to find out within ourselves what it is that we can do. And that's what's important, and not be told by some politico in one side or another. You have to make the decision for yourself, and you have to have the energy, I think, to investigate. And it's not hard. I mean,
it's really not, because we do have some.
And there's plenty of science out there that is valid and real and can make an informed decision, and then live a life that is much more sustainable than we are now.
I would encourage anybody that has a decent-sized yard to really think about doing the gardening more, even if they just start with some herbs, anything. There's a lot of flowers. I mean, they love flowers. There's a lot of edible flowers. I recently went on a hike with my grandchildren and had a book with me, Edible Wild Plants in the Northwest. In a 20-minute hike, which was all my 3-year-old was up to, up at Priest Lake, up by a little wooded area right by the lake, I picked 19 edible plants.
Sure.
I don't think people even, I mean, hopefully we never have to get to the point where we have to go. But if we had to, nature has provided. There's just so much for us.
Absolutely. But, Brenda, we're now urban. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but we're...
We really are.
So,
right.
But we can do something. I was in Havana a couple years ago, and in '89, when the Soviet Union fell apart, Cuba lost, 90 or 95% of its energy resources because it all came from the Soviet Union. So they had to go about doing things in a different way. And what they did was plant all over the city urban gardens. And they have gardens the size of football fields. And, so you would you'd go to work all day, and then you'd go to your house, and you'd stop by your local urban garden and pick up your vegetables and so on for your meal that night. And you'd pay. There was a little stand there. And now Havana's a little different because the growing season is 12 months and all that. But
hot houses and greenhouses.
Absolutely.
Did they have to dig up parking lots or concrete in order to provide some of the space?
Yeah, I think they did in some places, but in some places they just utilized what was there.
Well, and you mentioned you have a beautiful kind of garden area on this building.
Yeah,
Your
we
building
have
next door.
On one of our buildings above our restaurant, we have a garden that's going to be put in there. It's really interesting too. Speaking of reusing things,
right, in an urban environment.
Yeah, and I think it's really fun because we have outlining the garden as barriers. We've got these things that look like railroad ties, and what they are ground-up cars. And so,
what a good use!
Yeah. It's something that is. So we don't have a railroad tie filled with creosote. We've got a railroad tie that's a ground-up car that's been demagnetized some way. I don't know exactly how that happened, but that's what I was told. And they're the same size, and they'll sit there and they'll be there forever, just like a railroad tie.
Just like those old cars that are being done. Yes, there's got to be a use for those old cars. So I love to see that we've covered a lot of areas, and like also for anyone. By the way, this is Journey with Brenda Roberts, but my guest, Jim Sheehan, founder of the Model Community Building in Spokane, has been giving us a lot of ideas as to how we might live a more spiritually sustaining life as well as be kinder to the environment. Contact information for this community building and yourself?
Well, we have communitybuilding.org, or you can Google us. Just community building in Spokane, you'd get us. And the Center for Justice is, the law firm is Center for Justice, and you can Google that too. Center for Justice in Spokane, you'll get us, and all the contact information is there.
Great. Well, I hope that people will take not only some of the points you made, but be aware that if there are small business owners, as most people are homeowners or even in apartments, they can do things differently with what they bring in and what they certainly don't throw out or reuse.
Yeah.
And if they could just find a moment every few hours to ask themselves, am I fully present? And who's running my life? Just like you pointed out. Who's in charge right now?
Next time you stop at a red light, just for one breath, take one breath. Present for that one breath.
That'll help. It'll make your journey a lot more pleasant. Thank you for joining us.